Monday. I'm Greeny from Bristol, Connecticut this morning. We hope that you had a nice weekend. These are obviously circumstances unlike any that any of us have ever lived through. And here's what I can tell you. If you're a sports fan, we're going to get through them together. We will be here every single morning bringing you the news and information and analysis and fun from the world of sports. And let's start it today, as every day we will, with the news of the day. And there is big news. The IOC has announced that they will make a decision on whether or not to postpone this summer's Olympics within the next 4 weeks. The games are currently scheduled to begin in Tokyo on July 24th. In the meantime, Canada is not waiting around for a decision from the IOC. They announced yesterday that that country will not attend the 2020 games if they are not postponed. The Canadian Olympic Committee releasing this statement, quote, "This is not solely about athlete health. It is about public health. With COVID-19 and the associated risks, it is not safe for our athletes and the health and safety of their families and the broader Canadian community for athletes to continue training towards these games. In fact, it runs counter to the public health advice, which we urge all Canadians to follow." And I can point out that the Australian Olympic Committee immediately followed suit, telling its athletes to prepare for the Olympics to be held in 2021. And what I think of is we can hearken all the way back to 2 weeks ago when the NCAA decided to cancel this year's basketball tournaments, the men's and the women's. We all think of that as coming on the heels of the NBA suspending its season. In reality, it also came on the heels of Duke announcing if there was a tournament that they would not play in it. These moves by these countries and more soon to follow, I think, certainly clear this up. It seems almost impossible to imagine the Olympics will be held this coming summer. More news yesterday. Baseball. Blue Jays president Mark Shapiro said he believes that Major League Baseball would need about a month of workouts, at least a month is what he said, workouts and exhibition games before the regular season could begin. Opening day's already been postponed until at least mid-May. We will have Teixeira and Buster a little later with the latest. And meanwhile, NFL free agency continues despite all of this. And after a wild first week of free agency, Jameis Winston finds himself as the top remaining quarterback on the market after Tom Brady officially signed with his now former team, Jameis's former team, the Buccaneers, on Friday. And Jameis said goodbye to Tampa in a tweet over the weekend, tweeting, "It has been a great 5 seasons as a Buccaneer. All love and respect. I love Tampa. I look forward to seeing you all again in February." Remember, that's where the Super Bowl will be played this coming winter. So here is Adam Schefter, our NFL insider extraordinaire. Let's talk about it. What is the market for Jameis Winston?
Greeny, we said at the outset of free agency that there were more quarterbacks available than there were starting jobs to be had. And it's no different today. The starting jobs have been filled up. We've seen Phillip Rivers go to Indianapolis, Tom Brady go to Tampa, Teddy Bridgewater to Carolina, Nick Foles to compete in Chicago. There is not another obvious landing spot for Jameis Winston where he can compete for a starting job on day one, not on the surface right now. The Chargers are not going to be interested in Jameis Winston at this point in time. The New England Patriots signed Brian Hoyer. And so we've got a situation where Jameis Winston finds himself much in the same situation that Ryan Tannehill was in last year. And Ryan Tannehill wound up getting traded to Tennessee, where he backed up Marcus Mariota, got the chance to play, parlayed that into the starting job and the long-term contract that he received from Tennessee. It's no longer a question of Jameis Winston finding a starting job. It's finding the right job that he believes has the chance to grow in the future, maybe compete for the job, and better his situation for the 2021 season. But he's not going to land a starting job on paper for 2020.
It's really interesting. Here's a guy who was the first pick in the draft 5 years ago. Shefty, stay with me. I'm going to come back to you. But let me bring in my guys. Let's go to Marcus Spears, the big swagoo, and Dominique Foxworth, who's not nearly as big, but that's really neither here nor there for the purposes of this discussion. Swagoo, I'm going to start with you. You just heard Shefty say that the Chargers will not be interested. And so it does not sound to Shefty or to me, and I would imagine to anyone at this point, as though Jameis Winston is going to be a starting quarterback this coming year. Again, 5 years removed from being the first pick in the draft. What do you think?
G, good morning. Jameis needs to go to Pittsburgh, and Jameis needs to sit behind Ben Roethlisberger for a year. I believe it'll do him great service to just sit back and watch the game, process it. Dominique knows this as players. Sometimes, man, things they are going so fast. and it's happening. And while you're dealing with the problems that you have, you still have to play games and try to produce. The one fascinating thing about Jameis Winston is his ceiling is as high as anybody's in the NFL based on the successful things that we've seen him do. And obviously we lament about the 30 interceptions that weren't all his fault. But with that being said, if he can go sit behind Ben, if he can get under Mike Tomlin's wing, Mason Rudolph and Doug Hodges are not the future in Pittsburgh. And we kind of see Jameis being in that same vein. Big guys, strong arms, offense tailored to what they like to do. When you look at Pittsburgh and you think about Jameis Winston being able to sit under Mike Tomlin, think about him watching Ben Roethlisberger go about his business every day. To me, that's a good fit. If it's not a good fit offensively, it's a good fit psychologically, putting him around guys that have done it at a successful rate for a long time.
Yeah, I like having him in Pittsburgh. I'm sad to hear Adam say that Los Angeles, the Chargers is not an option, because I wanted to see those two polar opposites of quarterbacks go head to head. And Tyrod Taylor, who takes almost no risk, and Jameis Winston, who takes a lot of risk. I'm with everything you said right there, Swagoo, with the exception of trying to excuse some of Jameis's interceptions. I understand that they're not all his fault, but there were 9 dropped interceptions through the course of this year. Let's not try to paint this as Jameis Winston somehow had a bad situation. The man has thrown turnovers every year in his career except for 1 year in college. He's thrown a lot of turnovers. He's fumbled the ball a lot. He's a difficult guy to get behind, but I love the point that you made about seeing the game slow down, because when you have to prepare week to week, it's hard to learn new things. It's hard to add new things to your game. It's hard to pick up new nuances. It's hard to kind of reassess the way that you play. But when you have the opportunity to sit behind a vet, and I'm not sure that Ben Roethlisberger is a guy that he should model his game after, because they're very similar in that they're both guys who are going to take big chances down the field. But I do think having the opportunity to sit down and really break down the game, because he was a star from the time he was a freshman at Florida State. They were contending for national championships. So he's really never had the opportunity, and since he's been an adult, to kind of slow down and try to learn from the game and pick up things. So I do think that bodes well for Jameis in the future, if not immediately in this following season.
Swagoo, super quickly, do you believe he will ever be any team's regular starting quarterback again?
I do, G. I firmly believe that. Look, man, and to Dominique's point, I'm not trying to give him an excuse, but he also did throw 30 touchdowns and threw for 5,100 yards. So I don't want people to forget that and not remember that he had success as well.
I agree. I believe he will be a starting quarterback again, and I have come around to thinking that you guys are right. Let him sit for a year behind a veteran, sort of figure this thing out. He's still young enough. I believe there will be a second chapter for him. Now let's talk about another quarterback situation, and that one, of course, is the one in New England. They may need to find a long-term replacement for Tom Brady. We don't know if they believe they have that in Jarrett Stidham. They did agree to terms with the recently released Brian Hoyer on a 1-year deal this weekend. This will be his 3rd stint in New England. He was beaten out for the backup job by Jarrett Stidham last preseason. So here right now is what the quarterback room looks like in New England as far as who is going to succeed Tom Brady. Hoyer, of course, the most experienced. 1-11, however, in his last 12 starts, going back over 4 years. Cody Kessler, 0-8 for the Browns in 2016 and has barely played since. And, of course, Stidham has thrown a grand total of just 4 career passes. So let me go back to Shefty here as the Patriots add some depth to the quarterback room but still don't have an obvious starter. What do you know of the plan to finding one now in Foxborough?
Green, and that may be the plan going into training camp, where there is no obvious starter, where you have Jarrett Stidham on a rookie contract, you've got Brian Hoyer on a salary where basically he's making $2 million, of which the Colts are paying half, and you draft another young quarterback, and then you've got 3 quarterbacks, all capable, all waiting to see what we could do, all at that same point in time on inexpensive contracts, and you take that money and you rebuild the rest of the roster, and you put money elsewhere, and you sign young players to extensions, and you have a lot of extra money to spend because you haven't spent it at the quarterback position, because frankly right now, there's nobody that the Patriots have identified that money's worth spending on. So again, you're going to have Stidham competing for the job. Brian Hoyer's going to be capable of competing for the job. I think they draft another quarterback, and if there's some veteran quarterback still on the street in a couple of weeks, no home, price dropped, maybe the Patriots bring him into the mix as well. But I think that right now, they feel pretty comfortable with the quarterback situation with Brian Hoyer back in the fold, and they'll let these men compete this summer. There's not a lot of money invested at the position. It gives them flexibility and options, and let the best men win that job.
I feel like I need to ask you, Shefty, when you mentioned guys who might become available down the road, the two names that will jump to mind, I would imagine, in different circumstances, are Andy Dalton and Cam Newton. Is that sort of the way you're thinking?
Look, I don't think the Patriots are clamoring for either option right now. I think that if maybe the Cincinnati Bengals wanted to move on, maybe they could figure out a way. But Andy Dalton's due to make $17 million a year. The New England Patriots are not going to pay Andy Dalton $17 million a year. They're not going to pay Cam Newton $19.1 million a year. They're not going to sink that kind of money into a quarterback. And that's what we're talking about.
Right.
Later on, if one of these quarterbacks were released, wanted to go to New England on a real cheap contract, sure, that's possible. But I don't see that happening on either front. I don't see one of those quarterbacks being willing to take that money. I don't see the Patriots going that route. I think the Patriots like where they're set up right now, and they'll continue to assess the market as they do at every position, Greeny.
So well done. Shefty, thank you, my friend. You stay safe. We'll go check back with you as we
Likewise.
go. Let me go back to Marcus and Neek. Neek, I'll start with you. You heard all the things Shefty said. What makes the most sense to you?
Well, I still like the idea of Cam Newton going there because I think Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels understand the way the direction the quarterback position is going, and they want an opportunity. They've kind of been, I guess, golden handcuffs, but handcuffed, so to speak, and having Tom Brady with no athleticism back there. I think I would enjoy the idea of seeing Bill Belichick, who's a football historian, going into the archives to come up with some plays that utilize Cam Newton's athleticism. And while Schefter, I understand what Schefter is saying about paying them $19 million into perpetuity would be a problem, but I don't think that paying either one of those guys in the teens of millions for one season would be that bad for the Patriots. I think that would be an improvement. If they're looking to make a title run this year, I'm not sure you can do it with Brian Hoyer, who's been all around the league. He's obviously not a franchise quarterback, and the only memory we have of